Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about the Boston Tea Party. Not only is the Boston Tea Party a very significant protest in American history, and not only is it a major event leading up to the American Revolution, it is also a story about freedom, fairness, and protesting against an unfair government. Now, to understand the topic, we really have to go all the way back. In the early 1770s, British had just gotten done fighting a war, specifically the French and Indian War. Now, this made them have a lot of debt because the war was very expensive. So to pay off that debt, they decided to tax the colonies. Now, they taxed the colonies on things like sugar, glass, paper, and tea. Now, when they did this, the colonies were very upset because they didn't understand how they could be taxed without even having representation. This created the famous quote, "No taxation without representation." The colonies were basically saying, how do you have a right to tax us if we have no representation in your government? This obviously created some tensions between them, but not very much. Now, a lot of taxes were kind of revoked, but the tea on tax was very consistent. So, they passed the Tea Act of 1773. People didn't think the Tea Act was that bad at first because it made tea cheaper. But no, the British East India Company was the only people who could sell the tea to the colonies. And the colonies saw this as a sneaky way of British trying to take control over them again and tax them without representation. This obviously increased major tensions between the British and the American colonies. So then, when they had 3 British ships roll up with tea in the Boston Harbor, specifically the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, they were greeted by the Sons of Liberty. The Sons of Liberty were led by people like Samuel Adams. They were people who opposed British taxation and oppression. They were protesting and saying, "Do not unload your ships, we do not want you here." They were protesting the whole time. Now, the governor of Massachusetts told them that they are going to unload their ships and we are going to pay the tax. Now, they had a deadline, and the deadline was December 16th, 1773. Now, the protesters held them until December 16th, 1773. So, up to that deadline, there was tension everywhere. And on December 16th, a lot of the colonists met at the Old South Meeting House and wanted to see if anything would happen. Now, about 50 to 100 colonists decided that they were going to take action. They dressed up as Mohawk Native Americans, which basically, they weren't mocking the Native Americans. They were hiding their identity so that they wouldn't get charged with treason, because what they were about to do was treason. So they all boarded the ships, and they went and opened and broke into all the chests. They poured out about 342 chests of tea. You may not think that's a lot, and you may think, it's just tea, it's not money. Well, no, you are wrong, because it is 90,000 pounds of tea. That is an insane amount of tea. And if you would compare it to today, that is over $1 million worth of tea. Insane amount of money. Now, this protest wasn't violent. There was nothing violent about it. It was actually very organized. Apparently, they swept the floor after the whole thing happened. But it sent a very, very powerful message to the British, saying, we are not going to tolerate your unfair government any longer. We are not going to tolerate this unfairness towards us. Obviously, the British did not take this well. They said, we're going to treat Boston as an example to other people who will try to do this. They gave them the coercive acts, or what colonists call them, the intolerable acts, which were acts that diminished the government, and it closed down the Boston Harbor, and it put very, very strict control on Boston. This really sucked for people that lived in the colony. It was very, very strict control. British thought this would keep them under control, but it actually united all the colonies together and made them work together, and 2 years later, the American Revolution started. Not only is the Boston Tea Party about the power of protesting, but it is also about how ordinary people can change and alter history. And it is about liberty and freedom. Thank you so much.